Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker-Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process and for authors to learn valuable tips on producing and marketing your audiobooks. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Hey there, thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to be talking about communication, what it means, when it's effective, and why it's important. So let's start off with the Merriam-Webster definition of communication. Why not? It's defined in two different parts. So the first is the one that I think we most often think of, and that is a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. So this is defining really the transfer of information, right? And we do a lot of that, of course, in our work as authors, as audiobook professionals. We are sharing information through the audiobook. And since the audiobook is my focus, that's where we'll put the attention today. Now, the second part of the definition, part B, is personal rapport. And the example they use is a lack of communication between old and young persons. Personal rapport. And this, I think, is the piece that I want to focus on, because I think when we're talking about rapport, we're talking about more than just the message itself or the people in separate kinds of ways. Rapport is all about alignment. When we talk about getting into rapport, we may be talking about speaking at the same pacing or with the same kind of tone, lighter or heavier or more gravelly, or just the pacing of the tone or the pacing of the speech might be slower or faster, more halting. When we talk about physical rapport, we might talk about the way that we're sitting or standing or facing someone and when we're talking with them. Or we may be talking about a kind of a verbal rapport where we're using the same kinds of words that they're using. This level of rapport, where we can get in alignment with another person, whether we're with them personally or whether it's through the audiobook and through our marketing especially, this is really valuable to spend some time to think about. Let's start off with why rapport is important. When we, as humans, are in rapport with another person or through some kind of messaging, some kind of communication, when we're in alignment, we feel safer. That amygdala part of our brain is saying, yes, it is safe here. This fits in your world, you'll be safe. Because the amygdala, that creature part of our brain, is all about keeping us safe. We all know that experience of being places where maybe we don't feel safe. Our amygdala, our brain is telling us, whoa, something is off here. There's something that is not safe about this situation. And there are times when we maybe are in a conversation with someone and it just feels really uncomfortable. It is most often because we are not in rapport in some way. In fact, this is just a little fun side note or experiment you can do. If you're ever in a situation with somebody else, or the next time you are in a situation with someone else where you're feeling uncomfortable or they seem to feel uncomfortable, if there's any tension, try matching or getting closer to matching them physically or vocally, or start to use some of the words that they're using. And I think you'll find is really interesting is that tension will ease. You'll start to get in alignment with each other. Unless the other person, and this happens sometimes. I've had it happen where I try to get into rapport with someone and they seem to keep doing something next that will take us back out of rapport. But generally, we as creatures want to be in rapport. We want to feel safe and we want to be in alignment with those people that we're with. Now, you may be asking yourself, what does this have to do with audiobooks or marketing? Well, it has everything to do with marketing. Let's talk first about the one that I think most people think about and feels most obvious, and that is the words that we use. Here's an interesting thing. When we talk about our books or ourselves as an author or the work that we're doing or what it is that we care about, we use words that we are familiar with that feel like they best express that. Now, if you are with somebody and those words that you're using line up with how they would describe what they need, then the likelihood of making a sale is increased. For example, if you have a book that you describe as helping someone learn the techniques of how to paddle a kayak, and you are talking with somebody who, when they express their need, whether they're with you or not, would say, I'm trying to learn how to paddle a kayak. That would be a really good, you're in very, very much in word rapport, right? You're in alignment with that person because you're using the same words. The likelihood of the sale is much increased. Now, if you were to describe your work as you have a book that's about how to propel a boat through water, the person who's looking for how to paddle a kayak is much less likely to resonate with what you just said because you're using different words. I had a really interesting experience when I was in my previous marriage, and I had started to take some courses that were teaching me about these kinds of things. And so I thought, well, I'll try this out with my husband. And we were in this conversation, and I was talking about canoeing, and he was talking about boating or something like that. It was a small word difference, but it felt like we could not get on the same page in this conversation. It was really frustrating and annoying. And we're not married anymore, but that's not because of that conversation. This was a consistent pattern where I would, in the times when I had learned about rapport and I was trying to get into rapport, I would find that he would move us back out of rapport. So we weren't lining up. It just didn't work out. And clearly that is not what this episode is about. But what I'm trying to share is an example of how important it is to use the words that are appropriate for your work, but also are the words that your ideal target person that you wrote your book for, right? That target market, those people are using words. Are you using the words that they're using? Now, obviously, you still need to be accurate in what you're describing that your book is about. But in the example of the boat versus the kayak, you might instead, if yours is broader, you might include the words how to paddle a kayak in your list. You may better reach some alignment with those specific people. To try to sum up and bring to some kind of first conclusion, what I've talked about so far is it's really valuable to use words that your audience would be using when they're searching for your kind of material. This also pertains if you think about SEO, if you think about what people are putting in as their search terms. This is a real obvious way to think about this. You want to have in your description the search terms that people will most likely be using to search for your kind of content. And this is where sometimes our creativity can actually be a problem, because we can be so clever, we can be so witty, we can do all these, fun descriptions. But if we're not using words that our audience would be using to search for it, we're less likely to actually find them. And they're less likely to find you and your content. You might ask, well, how do I figure out what those words are? One good way is to start asking people that have either read your book or that are in your target market. Talk to them, let them answer open-ended questions, and notice what are those key words that they're using in their sentences to describe the kinds of things that your book includes, right? So that you can start to craft and mold your book description to fit, and not just your book description, but also your marketing messages that you use in any kind of marketing. That can be your email, newsletter, that can be your social media posts, really anywhere that you are doing marketing. Let's take a short pause and we'll come right back. Would you like to earn more from your audiobook sales? If you're an author with an audiobook, you may have noticed that royalties from Audible especially, and other platforms as well, are frankly kinda pathetically low, disappointingly low, and unfairly low considering what it cost you in effort and resources to create it. How is it the retailers are the ones making all the money off your work and investment? As someone who started in the audiobook industry in 1981, I've found it frustrating that authors keep getting shortchanged. The good news is that Pro Audio Voices just launched Amplify Audiobooks, a direct sale audiobook platform for authors that puts you back in the driver's seat. Earn 65% of the gross sales price that you set. Compare that to the percentage of the percentage that retailers give. Run promotions on schedule whenever you want. Create coupon codes. Build community with your customers, since you'll know who they are and how to contact them. Work with a caring, responsive, supportive team to help you succeed all along the way. Get help with marketing. Get paid weekly. We're helping audiobook authors who are frustrated by painfully low royalties and the barriers that prevent them from managing their own products and customers. Amplify Audiobooks is a direct sale platform that enables authors to earn much higher royalties and have way more control. We're disrupting the audiobook industry by putting authors first. Get started today at proaudiovoices.app or go to proaudiovoices.com and click on the Distribution Amplify link. Join the movement. In the first part of this episode, we focused mostly on our word choices, but I just want to touch briefly on the others. You'll have generally less of an opportunity to put these into play, since most of the time for our audiobook audiences, we are not physically in front of them or even online in front of them, but sometimes we are. And so when that's the case, this is kind of an interesting thing, is if you have a seated audience and you are standing on a stage, you actually are less in rapport than if you were to also sit. Now, that doesn't mean that you necessarily should sit, but it's something to be aware of, because it means you have to work extra hard at being in rapport with your audience. When you're on a Zoom call or if you're online on a screen, it's good to be aware of how you fit in the frame and how your audience may be fitting in their frames. Now, it's a little trickier when you've got, a whole range of people, but let's say that you are, have put yourself off to one side in the screen and everyone else is center. That's not a good idea. That in terms of being in rapport, just adjust yourself so you're in the center. I know some people that prefer to turn off their self-view. They may find it distracting to have their own self showing up on the screen in front of them, but it can be useful just to stay slightly aware of how you are looking to everybody else in the screen, just your frame and stuff. I'm sure you've all experienced that the call where you're talking to somebody's forehead and the rest of their head is off screen, or those kinds of situations, or they're standing off to the side in the screen and you can't really see them, or maybe you just see their stomach or something. These things happen all the time. And just because people aren't aware of how they look to the other person. And what I'm saying is that if you're trying to establish rapport with another person or a group of people, that it's useful, helpful to be aware of how you look within the screen to them. And just to wrap up, I want to come back to the word choice for just a moment, because, again, this is the piece that is probably most applicable in terms of your marketing messages. And if you're not sure what words are working, you can do some research and look at the best sellers that are targeted to your audience. So who is doing really well with their marketing and reaching their audience, selling lots of books? Read their book descriptions. Find out what words they are using. And if those words feel appropriate for your book, then you might start utilizing those, testing them out, see how they work. And then, as the actual wrap-up, I do want to talk about communication with your audience in one other way that is very exciting, I think, and is coming later this year. And I want to start letting people know that it is coming. And that is that on Amplify Audiobooks, that platform, we will be rolling out later this year, probably in late October or November, tools that are going to allow and support communication between authors and listeners. We're really ramping up the opportunities for community building. As those come into play, there will be so many more opportunities for that direct communication to be happening. And that's when this kind of word choice and rapport becomes even more valuable. So I want you to be developing these skills. They are so transformative in life, regardless of what you're doing as a human being, whether you're an author, narrator, it doesn't matter. If you're, a construction worker, these tools are just great human skills to be using to make your life and your relationships better. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have about it. You can reach us at proaudiovoices.com, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.